Welcome back to PennMicro. So far in this course, we've talked a fair bit about how to hold microsurgery instruments. And if there's anything you get out of this course, make sure that you're good on that first video, because ultimately, if you're not holding the instruments properly, everything else becomes harder. After holding the instruments properly, the next thing is we focused on the dot exercise, where essentially now we can get the tip of our micro instruments to a dot in three-dimensional space reliably, quickly, efficiently, with both the right hand and the left hand. Effectively now you can get your needle to exactly where you want it on that artery over and over again without tiring, without your wrists moving. And that's important. But now that you've gotten your needle to the vessel, you need to get that needle through the vessel in the best way possible. And in order to do that, it's another coordinated series of tasks that you need to be able to accomplish with your intrinsics that are different than pretty much anything else we do in the rest of surgery. So we want to focus a little bit on how to spin the microsurgery instruments in your hand to allow the needle to appropriately go through, to follow the curve of the needle. Your attendings will constantly tell you want to follow the curve of the needle. That's hard to do in microsurgery. So let's get to showing you how to do that. With this exercise, we're going to use our dots again that have been very familiar to us. So if you take a look at your jeweler's forceps and you're holding it appropriately, what this exercise is really going to be about is to show you how to spin the jeweler's forceps and keep the tip steady in three-dimensional space. One of the most common errors that I see in my trainees is when they're driving a needle through a vessel, instead of spinning the forceps or the needle driver with their intrinsics, what they're using is pronation and supination of the wrist. So if you take a look at a needle driver and pretend that I have a needle at the very tip of that, if I can spin the needle driver in my hand without moving my wrist, the tip of the needle driver doesn't move all that much in three-dimensional space. But if I'm using pronation and supination, look at how far that needle is moving and how much torque on the vessel that I'm creating. Ultimately, what that leads to is needle holds a lot more torque and pressure on the vessel than is required. And so this next step, or this next task, is a critical one in preventing that additional trauma. So we're going to go to our dots. And instead of using a needle driver, again, this is something you can do in your spare time in between cases, just using a pen or any other writing instrument. Here, in this case, I have a pencil. And what I want to do is find a dot, right? I'm holding my hands hypothenar eminences flat against the piece of paper. I'm going to pick a dot, and I'm going to get used to basically just moving and rotating this around the dot. This is not easy. And you take a look at what my index finger has to do in order to move, right? This is a coordinated movement of all of my fingers. And it is very hard to keep on that dot. But what your goal here is to really keep that tip of your instrument, of your pen, of your pencil, very close to that dot, and allow yourself to get in the habit of moving right around and precessing around that dot. That's a critical skill. And when I move to a needle driver, you're going to see the advantage of being able to do this, right? Because basically what I'm going to pretend is I'm going to take a bite of my vessel there and rotate this around the tip of that and just get used to that feeling. Well, in order for this to happen, you're going to watch and see my index, my thumb, my middle finger all moving relative to another. What's not moving is my wrist. And that's an important part of this exercise. You want to be able to do that with your dominant hand, but you also want to be able to grab a needle and rotate it out of a vessel with your non-dominant hand. So just like you did with your dominant hand, you want to focus on trying to do that with your non-dominant hand. And it's not easy. I'm struggling with it with myself. And this kind of practice just makes perfect.